You want me to put that on my Tudor?
Harry's wife. She will never be president. You can well imagine Harry's wife wandering around the 47,000 flushing toilets of the Monty Shit Show mansion, humming Hail to the Chief to herself as she dreams about being President of the United States. I've explained why politics are so attractive to our kind. Briefly, it's because it's an environment that caters to the prime aim so magnificently. By wielding political power, it enables us to assert control over, potentially, tens, if not hundreds of millions of people. It allows the receipt of massive amounts of fuel, both positive and negative, by virtue of the responses of people to the acts of that president, the act of the politician. And of course, it means that people will invariably react to a politician by supporting them at rallies or criticising them for the things that they've done. But either way, they're guaranteed a reaction, which means they're guaranteed fuel. It allows access to so many different people, and that means that the range of character traits that can be obtained are significant and fulsome. And, of course, there's the residual benefits. The wielding of power, the access to money, the access to networks, and facade management. And therefore, the prime aims are perhaps catered for better than any other arena than in politics. And thus, so many of our kind are instinctively, and in some instances consciously, drawn to the political arena because it's such a delicious feeding ground for us. Furthermore, of course, surviving in a political environment is something that narcissists are especially equipped for. No conscience, no sense of remorse, a rampant sense of entitlement, that fearsome ambition to get to the top, having no difficulty with expedient lies, not having accountability for one's actions, being untroubled by a conscience, having no difficulty in dropping people by virtue of compartmentalization, having no issue with using people for one's own means. A narcissist is well equipped indeed to flourish within a political environment. And, of course, given that it's festooned by so many of our kind, it means being one of our kind is all the more important in order to survive, thrive, and flourish in that environment. With all of that stated, you might think, well, as you've explained to us on many times, HG, Harry's wife is a narcissist, and therefore is she not magnificently equipped for the political environment? Well, in some respects, yes. She has no conscience, she's ambitious, she picks people up, uses them, and drops them. So she has many of the attributes that would meet with a measure of success. But she also is one that, because her flavour of narcissism, if you will, is all around being a victim, that it's not going to cut it with voters. Voters want to be associated with someone who's thrusting and successful, not somebody who whines about their family and complains about how difficult they've had it whilst living in a $14 million mansion. That really is not going to endear somebody to the voters. Furthermore, of course, you will well know that the gloves really will be off if she were to run for some form of office, with the serious press and the not-so-serious press going over everything with a fine-tooth comb and quite possibly releasing information that they've held back so far as a means of stymieing her presidential or senatorial ambitions. Furthermore, There's also the fact that opponents would have no difficulty, many of them being narcissists, in throwing mud at her, and as we've seen, as typical of the mid-range narcissist, she doles it out but she can't take it. But there's also more factors to take into account, and the fact is that, notwithstanding her being a narcissist, becoming president in the United States requires that you first be chosen, financed, and endorsed by the most prominent people in your party to represent and run as their candidate. And that is where she's going to fall down. No one can or will ever be elected to the presidency without the backing of the undeniable leader of the Democratic Party, which is the party that she subscribes to. There are obviously no nominations in the offing from ex-President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle, because they left her and Harry's wife off the guest list for his 60th birthday party on August the 6th, 2021, in Martha's Vineyard. See Obama birthday bummer. Camilla Tomeni reported at the time that the most likely reason why she wasn't included, that the Obamas did not like the fact that they were attacking their families, as a consequence of doing so during Harry and Harry's wife's interview with Oprah in March of that year. The Obamas value family, and certainly aren't the type of people who would want their children talking to the press. The continued brutality that was loaded upon the family by the Sussexes isn't what is considered in the States a virtue. Being excluded, of course, from Oprah's recent shindig also greatly impacts upon Harry's wife's political ambitions, but that hasn't been noted as much in the press. The fact is, Oprah influences many prominent politicians, and this glaring exclusion is a certainty that Oprah would not be offering Harry's wife her endorsement, or any of her vast millions. If she wants to win a nomination from the Democrats, she must have a very large network of influential people at a high level, and they have to be around her and financially supporting her. And she doesn't have any of that. Indeed, she doesn't have any friends, never mind high-level backers, with regard to a prominent political run. A reader of mine provided me with some informing evidence with regard to the failure to have a tilt at a presidential win. It was an excerpt from Rutgers University about how two prominent, highly qualified and experienced women weren't able to achieve a presidential tilt. In 1988 in the Democratic Party and in 2000 on the Republican side, highly accomplished and nationally prominent political women, which Harry's wife is not, each with a law degree from Harvard University, which Harry's wife does not have, emerged as possible presidential contenders. After 16 years in the US House of Representatives, experience that Harry's wife does not have, Congresswoman Patricia Schroeder of Colorado spent the summer of 1988 exploring whether she could become a viable candidate in her party's primaries. The exploration ended in an emotional press conference at which she announced that she could not raise the money required for a serious race. Remaining in Congress for another 8 years, Schroeder continued to play a vocal role as a national spokesperson for women's rights and for a progressive policy agenda. In her 1988 exploration, Schroeder contributed to the record set by previous women who knew that they could not win the presidency, but that someone must sound the call and call attention to the importance of beginning the long march to the White House. More than a decade later, Elizabeth Hanford Dole spent the better part of 1999 exploring a race for the presidency in 2000. She had not yet held elective office, but she had a long history of high-level government service, having worked for 4 presidents in major roles. None of those things which Harry's wife doesn't have any of those things. This included cabinet positions as Secretary of Transportation, 1983 to 1987, and Secretary of Labour, 1989 to 1991. Harry's wife has no experience in that regard. Moreover, she was married to Republican Senate leader Bob Dole. Harry's wife doesn't have that luxury, himself a previous presidential contender. She could also claim executive leadership credentials based on 8 years as president of the American Red Cross, not something that Harry's wife has. By virtue of her own professional and political experience, as well as a vast network of connections, things that Harry's wife doesn't have, and the extent to which she does have connections, they're being eroded by her behaviour, Elizabeth Dole might have been expected to become a serious candidate for the presidency. Yet after 9 months, she dropped out, without ever developing as a contender on the campaign trail. She cited the difficulty of raising money as a major barrier to becoming a viable presidential candidacy, and gave her support to George W. Bush, who had a campaign chest with tens of millions of dollars. Then, of course, there's Hillary Clinton. And even though she's had many, many years of political experience and comes from a political dynasty, and married, of course, to a former president, it still wasn't enough to get her elected. So the consequence is that there we have 3 prominent women who are poles apart from Harry's wife in terms of ability, credentials, backing, and they couldn't make it for a tilt at the presidency. Which, of course, begs the question, why does she think that she can? It's simply this. It isn't because she has huge backers behind her that are waiting in the shadows. It's simply that she's so deluded that having ensnared a prince and become infamous around the globe, that encourages her to think that she could do anything that she wants. And she seriously believes, driven by her narcissistic delusion, that she could become President of the United States. The facts, however, point to the fact that not only would she not be able to mount a serious challenge in terms of credentials, backing, financial support, and experience, that the whole process itself will see her torn apart because she hasn't neither the charisma, humour, or political savvy as a consequence of low cognitive function. And therefore, she would never get to that point at all. She may well try, and she will crash and burn spectacularly. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.